So welcome to the Node.js package of maintenance team meeting for December 15th, 2020. We'll follow the agenda that was tagged in the issue in the repo, which was issue number 437. Before we get started, does anybody have any announcements that they'd like to share?
Yeah, not exactly an announcement, just a small note that we do have a process for creating repositories in pkg.js.org. I think there was one recently created, though I'm not sure if there was an issue for that. So.
Okay.
That was me. I was just curious about it. So, okay. Where is that process? Is it in the repo somewhere?
It's yes. There's a governance doc, and there's the other one. Let me I'll paste that in a moment. Yeah, I'll paste the link in the chat there.
I have the governance one I can paste in if that's the one you were thinking. This one? I don't know, Dominicus, that's the one you were thinking, or?
Yes, probably. Does it have the repository management? Yes. Okay. And then it has a pkg.js organization, and it has a section on adding or removing repositories.
Great. Okay, any other things before we move on to the issues for the agenda? Okay, if not, we'll move on to the first one. So the first one is suggested list of modules to help get support info into. That one, I'd added a PR to add to the Node add-on API repo that I'm just double checking. Yes, it's merged, so that'll actually go out in the release, which is coming out in the next few days. So if people have time and suggestions of other good modules to put in there, if you can put them in. Also working with the team at Red Hat to add it for a number of the modules we have under NodeShift. And we've done that for a number of them, and we'll actually be blogging a little bit about having done that too early in the new year. Anything more to discuss on that one before we move on? Okay, so I just want to take that notes under. Okay, the next one is building create PKG number 404. I can't remember who added that one.
I think you made the last comment, which was, "Hey Wes, can you just push whatever you have?" Which I just
yes.
now. Sorry, I hadn't logged into GitHub on my vacation. Okay. Part of my runs. It was good, but yes, I can definitely push it. I will add that to my to-do list for this week. I will make sure that gets done. But I'm pretty sure it was pretty much complete for an initial pass anyway. I think I was just trying to write tests, which was me being overly particular. So.
Yeah, I think we discussed it. This I can see was 14 days ago. So in the last meeting we talked about it, and I just added the comment. Be good to just get what we got out there, and then other people could contribute too. So
completely agree. I will get right on that.
Sounds good. Okay, the next one then is suggest ignoring a vulnerability by the package maintainer. This is 386. I don't think we've made any progress since last meeting, unless anybody else has some comments, suggestions to add on that one.
I just want to follow up. And did we ever send out an email to start the collaboration space, or no?
No, I think that's everybody got pretty busy.
Yeah. There's a draft of the email. I think all we had to do was probably send it. I thought I sent out the draft to the group, and I don't know if we got any feedback. I think that was sort of where it got left off. I don't know if anybody took a look. And
is this still a HackMD doc? Is that the link? Okay. Maybe just if we can resurface the link. I don't think I bookmarked it. So
let me see. I'll see if I can find it really quick.
Yeah, I'll give it once over, and then maybe we can make a action to also try to get by the end of the week, just get that out. Because I know that you and I were poised to champion that collaboration space. So my end of year is at the end of at the end of at the end of this week. So any to-dos should get done by Friday. So thanks, Wes. That's great.
Yeah, I think I'd looked and didn't have any extra feedback. So yeah, if you take a look, and I'd assume by now if we were going to get feedback, we'd get feedback. Otherwise, I think it looked pretty good. Sounds good. Okay, got that one. So on to the next one then, which is the next steps, unless, yeah, I guess anything on? No? Okay, so the next one is next steps on support levels in package.json. I think on that one, so it's worth taking a quick look. So we've got a set of checkboxes there. We've got add support info to modules within the node.js org. So at least started with that on node add-on API. We should probably look at other ones. Evangelize and get additional input. So we did do a blog. Probably needs to sort of revisit that again at some point once we do a little bit more progress on getting things into modules. Blog on adding a tool to your CI. PRs to modules to add information. We kind of have that issue to track. That tool to scan dependencies and reports on support information. I think that was intended to be the more sophisticated one, so that's probably a little bit early still.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. If that was, because I thought what we merged does the minor, like the basic reporting, right? Is there another checkbox for that one?
I don't think we had another checkbox for that. Let's see. Update.
We just had update the tool to support the new structure, which we did, I think, before even that you landed. So I think we should either break that out into two checkboxes or call this one checked and then figure out. Sorry, that my daughter just woke up from the nap in the background. But yeah, I think maybe breaking it into two checkboxes would probably be the best.
Yeah. So to show support info for package dependencies. So I'm adding one with a check mark above, and then I will, and here, I'll share my screen so you can see if that's what looks right. So I've added this one, which was like middle command and support tool to show support info for package dependencies. And then this one is to scan dependencies and provide more comprehensive. Does that make sense? Look good to everybody?
Yeah, that looks good.
Okay. And then it's create URL on a website that generates SVG for README that reports your level and has linked to the pages which describe the levels. I think that was kind of along the lines of showing,
this is something
making it easier.
Yeah, this is something that we could show on package pages on like npmjs.com as well. So I know that the conversation has been around bundle phobia supporting this.
Right.
But this is potentially an ask that we could actually bring to the npm/feedback repo, like even if it's just a proposal for, hey, can you support this kind of like metadata or this information. I think it would be a good exercise to see if we can push it through that way.
Yeah, I think that would be interesting. We had at least one question on like, how did we get these things into the support package itself? So showing on NPM and making that easier definitely sounds good.
Yeah, it may not show up like those badges.
Sure.
Like those badges, it can be like almost like twofold. Like it's great to have these badges, but then also,
yeah. Yeah, no, I know what you're saying was like when I do npm JS and I support, actually, like I search on support. No, it's at pkgs, right? At pkgs/support. I got that right. No, is it the other way? Right, I could see, like, that's just because it's in the README, but if it actually showed up somewhere on the right or wherever, that would be interesting, yeah.
Yeah, so that's information definitely that I think is helpful, similar to like licensing information. If the support information is privileged in some way on the website, would also be great.
Okay.
Yeah.
So submit, what would you call that, an RFC request, or what is it?
It's a lot lighter than that. So like the feedback topic essentially in the npm /feedback repo. And you can start the discussion there. And then we've been doing weekly triaging of that.
Okay.
The product managers and engineer managers have been joining those calls. So getting that on our roadmap would be good.
Okay. Is that something you want to do? You want me to do?
It might be better if it comes from somebody outside of the
sure.
the org. It just like shows actual that there's an interest for that.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I can go ahead and do that, because that actually would be very helpful, I think, in terms of, like, people would see that and go, I wonder what that is, right? And I think it would be it's kind of help the chicken and the egg thing, right? Because people would wonder, oh, it's shown there, maybe I should include it, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Two things. One, Jordan is waiting to be promoted.
Oh.
But also, I'm wondering, create a URL. Like those badges, I think are just Badgin, I think is the name of it. Is there a reason why we would need something different than just that?
So maybe it just needs to be.
Like those are not something I made. I just used I think the Badgin API, which I think is a fairly active community member. Stifle, I think, manages that. I think that's the GitHub handle. I'm not sure of their real name. But I mean, they just have a little API, and you just put what you want the text to be in the URL, and it generates the image, and that's what's using there. So I'm wondering if maybe we just remove that.
I'm wondering,
or maybe we give instructions on how to use Badgin to generate them or something. I guess maybe would be another way.
Right here, yeah. I just changed it to say this. Facilitate document how to put badges with support info elements on your package README.
Yeah, I think that's great.
Okay,
yeah.
So, because I think we don't need to invent something new or whatever, but it's more around helping people get them there. And I think just like what you said, just documenting what you did already would be a great thing. Okay, no, that's good. Couple good concrete things to do as a next step. Anything more we want to discuss on this one? If not, I'm going to go back to the agenda. I think, there we go. Okay, got it somewhere else. I think that was the last thing that was tagged for the agenda. Were there any other issues or things that people wanted to discuss? If not, I'm going to just check the calendar for the next entry. Because I think
I'm wondering, we did quite a bit this year, like this particular team. I think actually did like an amazing job this year. I was wondering if maybe it would be worth, I don't know, doing a small blog post just about like a year in review kind of thing or something. I just feel like the teams and working groups all sort of have their disparate, things going on, but like I haven't seen anything that sort of brings together like here's what, all these people participated, here's what they did, all this great work. I feel like this team we have just a lot of things happened. Maybe some others don't have as much. But I think it'd be interesting to consider, like, because as an outreach thing, it would also be a pretty important thing. Like, I know somebody came to the OpenJS Slack one time and was like, hey, I want to participate. And like, for at least a day, nobody really answered. They were like, how? But I feel like showing how much work, a team like this has accomplished would be a pretty good way to, concretely say, look, these are valuable. Come join them, take part. We actually do stuff. It's not just the meetings.
Right. We don't just chat. We actually, I think that's a great idea. Like the NAPI team recently put out hey, node.js API just hit 3 million in downloads, sort of a retrospective like that too, and talked about like the things that happened in the past year. So I think that like this is very much in that same vein, and definitely think it's a good idea to celebrate what we did, but also, get out there to see, hopefully interest other people to say, hey, yeah, that's cool. Maybe I'll try and help out too. So how do we want to, like, in terms of doing that, do we want to open an issue and do that early in the new year, or what's kind of, you have any thoughts on that?
I can open an issue and just sort of bullet point the idea, since I brought it up, and we can see, what we can maybe just start a list of things we'd want to highlight, and then and maybe then, once we have that, we can go off and write actual prose for it.
Yeah, because I think once we have that list, it'll be pretty obvious how we could like split it up among the team to say, hey, I'll go write this section, you can write this other section, and sort of crowdsource something that will end up being pretty good.
Yeah, I like that approach.
Okay, yeah, no, that's definitely good to look forward to first to kick off the new year. Any other great ideas like that? Now I'm putting pressure on everybody else.
It's a pretty high bar.
Yeah, I know. But I will say, I think that it's a little bit what Wes was getting at that too, is like we should be, thankful to everybody on the team for all the work they've done over the last year and the contributions. And it's definitely a great group of people to come and, share the ideas and work on different things. And yeah, it's great. It'll be great to look back, because I think we'll be surprised actually in all the different things. Sometimes it feels like, things drag out a bit, but when we look back over the year, I'm pretty sure we're going to be happy with what we've got.
One of the shining lights of 2020.
Yeah, that's right.
It doesn't take much to be 2020, but this definitely, I think this team definitely did a lot of good work. So
yeah,
it would be good to gotta celebrate the wins.
For sure. Yeah, no, exactly. It's too easy to just sort of look forward and go, oh my God, I got more stuff to do, versus, looking back and saying, oh, look at all this great stuff that we did get done. Okay, if that's it, we'll give people back time, and I hope everybody has a time to take a break and relax a little bit, and we'll regroup in January and keep on going.
Happy New Year.
Yep. Thanks.
One
Talk
quick
to everybody
question.
later.
Done.
Sorry. Yeah.
Are we having that last meeting of the year?
Yeah, I was just looking at that. I'm not going to be around on the 29th. Has everybody agreed we should just cancel that? And
I
let's
won't
just skip
I
it.
won't be here.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, no, thanks for pointing that out. I was just doing that, but I will delete it from the calendar.
And just to be clear, are we happy with the current meeting cadence, and like in terms of schedules and frequencies and stuff, or is that something we want to adjust? I'm not necessarily unhappy with it. I'm just, it seems a good time like an opportune time.
Yeah.
We can discuss offline. We can
I've been a little bit absent lately, but I'm wondering, have they all ended short?
I don't think so. Yeah, I think we've spent, pretty sure last time we spent most of the time. So we've been.
How's attendance been at the other time, the one that is painful for Pacific? That I never attend.
It's been lower.
It's definitely lighter. Yeah, that one, I guess that would be, we could certainly consider.
Just like,
maybe we should have an email
I don't mind
survey.
missing meetings for the sake of equity, of time zone equity, right? But I also think that it's useful to reevaluate if there is actually value being gotten out of time zone equity at times. So
Would
Yeah,
you
I
be
think-
willing to, sorry, go ahead, Dominicus.
I think that time was settled because I don't know whoever managed it and that had their schedules. Did we? Maybe we can just change the time a couple of hours later, 1 hour, 2 hours, and that is just enough. That would just be enough, or I don't know.
Yeah, I maybe Jordan, any chance you'd volunteer to open an issue to say, let's review our time zones, like our times,
Sure.
like basically, give that maybe it can be like fine, never make, can occasionally make or something like that, right? And based on that, we can see if it's, we can try and figure out whether like an hour earlier or later would make much of a difference or.
Yeah, I have no opinion. I like not really. So I just want to, ask the question. So yeah, I'll go ahead and file an issue.
Sounds good.
So one quick note on Bradley, did you want to bring up, I know you created an issue for, and wanted to bring, I think, up in the agenda, the issue of permissions in package.json, I think? Or,
yeah.
yeah.
I was told to come to this group, open an issue on the repo. I don't know if it makes sense for the meetings here or having breakout meetings, but essentially the idea is allowing package authors to list what they are requesting permission-wise when you install their package. Not what's being granted, just so a package manager could say, oh, you're installing event stream, and then you would see, for example, why would it need access to HTTP? And then the package manager, whenever it gets approved or denied, could modify the policy file and use the existing policy mechanism to grant or deny access to things. So that's it.
That is definitely a topic we would typically discuss in the meetings. Has everybody, I know I haven't read the issue. This is the first time I've heard. Has everybody? Because we could maybe
take the time right now.
Yeah,
right.
that's right. We got time.
Okay, that's what I was gonna say. We do have time, and so okay. I guess I'll go.
One question I thought that I had, like I just briefly looked at it. One thought I wondered is, and somebody mentioned the space, right? Space. Like I almost like, we're talking about how we manage what's in package JSON almost, right? And I wonder if like that's a broader group than this group, or is it that, we should just continue to treat them one off? I don't really know.
I think this is like a tooling issue. Like this is like, I think, and Bradley, you can sort of like clarify and scope the discussion. I think this is, a tooling issue that like, yes, maybe out of this, we say there's like some sort of standard way of defining this, but then like the only way this gets adoption or support is once the tools actually like take that and run with it, right? So I think the initial discussion was brought up in sort of like the npm RC calls that we had, and then I said, hey, let's direct it over here and have this discussion here about what that looks like, and then we can look at that as, hey, like how are we going to support it in npm or somewhere else, like other package managers, right? So is that right, Bradley? Is that kind of how you look at it? It's like the only way that this is meaningful is if there's adoption of it, right?
Kind of, yes. The key point is kind of hinted at in what you just said. This isn't something that'll actually be used by Node itself. It's kind of an integration with other tools. Node already has the policy mechanism and it's getting more stuff added to it. But there's no way for tools to integrate with the policy mechanism. So you have to do it yourself or with customized tooling like we do. And so we need a way for package authors to reasonably state and show to people installing their packages what permissions are being granted. And, well, requested. NPM or the installer itself would grant the permissions. Yeah.
I think that lines up with what Darcy said, like there's tooling that would end up using the data. My only question was like, is each one of these, like, should the package maintenance team become like the place we discuss every time we want to add something to package JSON, or the metadata that goes along with a package? Maybe the answer is yes. Or is like there a broader group that we should involve under like a collaboration space? Or, you know, not to derail this discussion, we should probably just have this discussion here, but that was more of a thought.
I actually think we do need to have that discussion, because this has come up a bunch of times and nobody knows where to go. And that's why people end up coming to this meeting, because this is such a broad scope typically.
Right.
So I think that ownership of parts of package JSON has precedence for being distributed today. And I don't think that's a bad thing. In this case, this to me sounds, and this is a very brief read, like just what I have since you started talking in the link I posted, sounds to me really like an NPM feature or a Yarn feature or a whatever, you know, which to me means that we don't really have, maybe a say is not really the right thing. I think we could help evolve a specification for what features it would need to support and how you define it from a package maintainer perspective. But I'm not entirely sure we are the right group to own a decision in this regard. That's my opinion.
Can I clarify, Bradley? You said NPM would grant access. Do you mean NPM would modify the root level applications policies config, or is there some other mechanism you had in mind?
No, it would modify a config of some kind.
Okay.
In
So,
particular,
I mean,
there are
yeah.
good reasons, and we have docs why you cannot put your application config, like your policies, inside your application directory, because there are some problems if you do that. So we're not looking to put application level permissions inside of package JSON.
Right. But inside the application directory, just not inside a package JSON. Is that right?
No, you don't want it in your application directory.
Okay. So NPM would also have to have a way to know where that config lives?
Probably, but it has like a standard set of directories already in files. So.
And does it, I mean, I'm thinking it NPM could do this, but it wouldn't have to be. You could have like another tool that you installed that would be like, I've done my NPM install, now do my lockdown. And it would read the same data and, you know, adjust configs and stuff like that.
So that's difficult because people use install scripts.
Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah.
Well, NPM invokes install scripts. So if NPM is going to restrict the permissions of like, or are you somehow envisioning that like it will install a package, use that package's declared permissions, modify the policy config for each package as it's installed, so that the install scripts that NPM then executes obey those permissions? Or is it something more like how exactly would that interplay work?
So that's a bit more up to implementation, but you can do directory level scoping like you're suggesting, Jordan, where within a directory that NPM creates on disk, you can limit what node will actually allow loading within those directories. So you would need to do it pre-install and not post-install, because if somebody has a malicious script in the install step, like we saw, what was it, the NRRAT one last week, 2 weeks ago, they installed it ahead of runtime. So
I guess when I'm like, I can understand, there seems to be a couple different use cases here, right? Like I can understand the one about for the runtime usage of my package, I want to declare the permissions I need so that it's easier for consumers to say, yes, you should have that permission when they're opting into locking things down. In other words, you know, making sure the permissions I essentially declare I need match what they expect I should need. So that seems useful, and just, it's really just, for that, it seems like it's really just picking a field name and a schema for package JSON that like everyone agrees to not mess with, and then and this I think is the right place for that. The separate question of like, how do you during the install process, how do you learn about the permissions that its post-install scripts use, and then decide mid-install whether to run that script or not, or like before the install process is completed? Like that seems like a much more complex discussion that would seem more appropriate in the npm RFC process to me, just to work out the semantics. And then when those are worked out, and npm in particular has said that yes, this is feasible and makes sense and like practical, then it seems also reasonable to come back to this group to make sure that the other package managers are, which you could ping them outside of this group, of course, but like just kind of this group seems to me like a common stakeholder location for that sort of thing. But the way install scripts are invoked is so sensitive to the CLI itself that I think you'd have to have extensive discussion in that arena with some of the folks on this call, before we could even have a productive discussion about it. Because those are like two vastly different use cases, I think, to me. One is protecting your application, the other is protecting your development and CI environment.
Declaring your actual permissions in both, you're just talking about different timings. I don't expect there to be a different kind of configuration between them.
Yeah, I mean, it's fine if like the schema is the same or something, but those would need to be separable, because there's plenty of packages that need no permissions at runtime and vast permissions at install time, and there's plenty of packages that need no permissions at install time and vast permissions at runtime, and everything in between. So like those would have to be distinct configs, even if it's the same schema.
Not exactly, but they are different conditions. Yes.
Well, right, like, but I guess what I mean is, as a package author, I absolutely would need to be able to specify those differently, and it ideally would be convenient for me to do so. And I think that I don't have any packages that have post-install scripts, of course, but like the ones that I have seen that are reasonable, like definitely typically need different permissions than the runtime code does. And so while you could,
disagreement on that.
Okay, but I guess what I mean is, I'm saying is that I think that despite that you can view it as, oh, it's the same type of policy or lockdown or protection, just different timings. I think it's actually vastly different, because it's vastly different kinds of use cases.
Can you explain that? How are they vastly
well, yes,
different use cases for locking down permissions?
Not for locking down, I mean, the use case for locking down permissions is I'm paranoid about different places, right? But it's I'm saying that the actual
tooling that's
ability to do stuff in post install is a vastly different use case than the ability to do stuff at runtime.
Right.
And so the like, for example, it will be probably highly disruptive if you lock everything down by default at runtime until somebody declares they need it and you explicitly grant it. I know you can opt into doing that, but like that is likely to be a very painful road. However, if you default to no permissions on post-install scripts, that is not going to be that painful. You'll have like 3 things or something at most that you need to like explicitly say, yeah, that's cool, that's cool, that's cool, and then you're done. So like I think that, and also I think that most users might not care about locking down runtime to the same level that they actually care about post-install scripts, because the runtime stuff like doesn't have access to a lot of important things that the install scripts might.
Right, and they like those environments may be locked down in a different way, like they're running in a Docker container or somewhere else. And yeah, so I think from Jordan's comments, like I could easily imagine that you'd want 2 sets. One which is like, here's the permissions I need for post install, and here's the permissions I need at runtime, because those could be like completely different.
I think we're all in agreement on that. I just don't see how the use cases are different. You're trying to secure things in both environments.
I'm not saying the use cases of the person doing the securing. I'm saying the equally important use cases of the person who's authoring the package that is going to become secured.
I don't understand.
Just to be mindful, I know Owen's had his hand up for a while.
Sorry, I can explain that further after Owen's had a chance to speak. Sorry about that.
I mean, I think just what Jordan was saying is the way in which you arrive at what needs to be secured might be harder in different contexts. I think the use cases are the same. The context is different. And that was kind of my thought is I could see, the worst case scenario is you have like a key in package JSON that says, permissions, NPM permissions node. And yeah, the schemas might be the same, but the work to do the threat modeling or whatever might be different. But does that mean that if we, kind of to Jordan's point earlier, if we can tease out what the schema looks like, if it can be a shared schema, even if the implementation is different, does that mean we could at least parallelize this? Because post install is its own can of worms, but runtime is a different can of worms. And maybe as long as, to Wes's point, if we can establish a spec, that maybe we can, multi-thread the work to tailor this spec to the specific context, post install time, whatever.
I think there's a lot of security claims being thrown around that they're different, but if we look at past incidents, blog write-up by Snick on EventStream, it shows you that there was a file write occurring. And the file write during an install script was allowing them to do stuff at runtime.
I think that when you have a discussion about security with security folks, it usually ends up slippery sloping its way to this is all equally bad and it's all equal security and everyone cares equally about securing these things. But in practice, that's not the case. People don't care the same way about securing dev deps as they do runtime deps. They have different concerns about that, even if the attack vectors end up being the same.
Company.
Right. No, and I'm sure there exist plenty of companies, yours and my own, that are paranoid to a level where they would treat them the same. But these features shouldn't be designed just for paranoid enterprise companies with hired security teams.
We have a hand up.
Yeah, Wes has his hand up as well.
Yeah, so I think these are all great points. I think it makes it very clear that we need a really strong deep dive on this. And I do think that even if we might be the right group to have the how does this look when a package author defines it in package JSON, I think until we have nailed down what NPM is supposed to do, I don't think we can have the full productive conversation around this. I think we need all of those little nitty-gritty details in some fashion, maybe not perfectly figured out, but at least here are the goals that these tools need to be able to achieve. We want to be able to secure permissions in post install scripts. We want to be able to secure permissions at runtime. We want those things to be defined by package maintainers, and then for users of the tooling to look at it and approve it, and then have it modify this file in this location. Until we have sort of what I see as an NPM RFC that really outlines the behavior that we're hoping to achieve, I don't think we can come up with the right schema. I think we can have a bunch of discussions about what might fit in, but I think we really need and maybe this actually needs just a proof of concept tool somewhere that says look, here's an example. It's built on top of Arborist and it just goes through your tree and reads the field from a package JSON and writes a file. And then we could actually look at it with all the cards on the table instead of this sort of back and forth, which I think will happen in the course of that. But I think right here, it's a little bit unproductive because it's sort of premature since we don't really understand what the tools need to do with this information.
So we can do that. We already have a tool called node-policy out there that was requested to be built by Matteo a while ago. It does static analysis rather than using a field to do it. You could look at that, or we could do something else. Creating a field seems a little bit of a catch-22 if the goal is to figure out what field to create and requiring us to create it before we determine that.
Well, right, but the discussion is how we roll that out, and we can have a proof of concept tool that uses a field that then gets changed once it actually is adopted by the sort of wider ecosystem. So I think the process that happened with ZB's audit resolver is sort of similar. He, built a proof of concept tool, brought it to NPM. We've had a bunch of discussions over there. And then we've talked about what that looks like in the collaboration space discussion. And that's where we would nail down the schema, right? But it took those sort of preliminary steps for us all to get on the same page of what are the requirements and what are the needs, right? And I think that's where I'm a little bit lacking here from this discussion and reading the thread is I think there's just a lot of missing pieces that we haven't fleshed out for everybody to get on the same page yet.
All right. I guess Jordan.
Did Dominicus get his chance to speak?
No, not yet.
Yeah, go ahead, and I'll go after you.
Yeah.
Okay. I just like to take a step back very quickly. So the policy file, it needs to live outside of your application directory, right? And for
in general, yes.
Yeah. Which means that I lost it. That was so long ago. It was like 3 minutes ago that I thought.
So I can
yes.
guess at what you're trying to say. A lot of people, when they generate artifacts for things through their CI/CD pipeline, they actually only generate a single directory, and it's what has their package JSON and things contained within it. So in general, if you're going to be using policies and you want to have different file permissions so people can't manipulate this policy file, you put it outside that directory, which means that it's a little bit of a different workflow than a lot of people use in their CI/CD as it exists today.
Right. So then the question is really, if there's going to be policy files, then you may or may not want to have a separate policy depending on your context, whether it's an installation or whether it's application runtime, right? So you're going to have different policies, which means that from NPM perspective, I'm not sure that I understand why does NPM need to be at the heart of it, because really, as someone I think was right, we could build a tool and trial this and get that tool into the tool chain via pre-install scripts or something similar. But what NPM really needs to do, the only thing it needs to do is to pass the correct policy file when it runs the pre-install, post-install scripts, and then generating that policy file, keeping it up to date based on what's in your dependency tree. That's kind of a different concern, right? It's not directly the how that such a tool would be integrated with NPM and what kind of a UX it would have. That's a bit of a broader discussion and maybe for NPM to consider. But as it could very well be just a tool that lives on its own. In a similar vein, the scripting, whether you want to run the scripts on install, is an orthogonal concern, right? I do have the allow scripts module, which basically just executes the pre-install, post-install scripts. So that could be outside of your install lifecycle altogether, right? So getting the wider adoption for that and pushing that out into general public for folks who may not even be aware that they could use policies for that. That is once again a broader concern, but I think these are all kind of the separate work streams. And from the perspective of this particular issue, if this particular issue is just limiting itself to declaring a manifest of requested permissions, then we can totally build everything around that, right? If it's just a manifest for, and as you mentioned that,
Oh,
You
lost
cut
it.
out.
I think,
You
yeah,
just got out.
Dominicus, you sort of.
Still
Oh.
cutting out,
Still out.
or still
Can't-
no sound.
Can't hear you. Sorry, Don.
Yeah. Oh no, he was just about to say something brilliant.
yes, can you hear me now?
Yeah, now we can.
Yes.
But the sound is coming out the wrong speaker now. Bluetooth, huh? Yeah, and I'm plugged in with a cable and it doesn't help.
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of different tools that can be built and that they can then be combined into a tool chain. And then in terms of package managers, it's up to them to decide whether they want to take these tools in or build something else and what kind of an experience they want to provide.
I think Jordan. Sorry,
is
go
this
Yeah,
just a declaration of a manifest of what the package and each folder's the scope. I see a suggestion for a scope. I guess that's a folder or a file or maybe a glob. Each package can declare what they want. You may then want another tool which syncs that up with scans the folder and sees that these permissions are actually declared and all of that to generate that policy and to generate the permissions manifest. But I think these are all separate concerns and can be worked, and they don't need to be bundled into one big thing where we have to solve one before the other.
So in terms of the development workflow, I agree with you, Dominicus. But the point I've been planning to make anyway was, Bradley, that when you're building a feature in Node that only like enterprise customers or people that are doing instrumentation or something, like sort of niche use cases that are still really important, it's fine, right? You can just build it because people who don't need it just won't care. And I feel like that's policies has been developed in that vein. However, if it's going to require adoption from package authors in the ecosystem, it is going to require that the feature be widely accessible. Otherwise, nobody's going to care about serving it. For example, IBM has some architecture, some AIX thing that some Node NPM packages broke on, and now it seems like they've been using the Mechanical Turk or something to hire random people to add the AIX architecture to the Travis config in a ton of random open source packages. And the response that I've given everyone on when it's all been my packages has been, this doesn't behave differently on different architectures. Why would I care about testing, making my testing slower and adding this? And they have not done a compelling job of convincing me why I should care. So similarly, I think that policies has to be something, in order for package authors to want to add a permissions manifest, package authors are going to have to be motivated to support using policies. And they're only going to do that if a lot of people want to use policies. And that's only going to happen if it meets the use cases, not of large enterprise companies, but of like the long tail of NPM developers. So I think it is important to keep that in mind when designing all of these things, to make sure that it is capable of receiving adoption eventually. Even though, as Dominicus says, like there's lots of ways to develop things out and flesh out proofs of concept or whatever that don't require shipping things in Node or NPM yet, or at least in NPM. I think that it's going to be pretty important that it be widely marketable for adoption.
So you've made a bunch of claims about it not being usable in some ways, targeted.
Oh yeah, and I don't mean to imply it's definitely not. I've not tried to use it. I'm just,
But you have made those claims.
Okay.
So the goal of policies is exactly like you're stating. We've added roughly the equivalent of allow read and allow write through scoping mechanisms and stuff like that. You can handwrite a policy file. It's not too difficult. If the claim is that it was built as enterprise and therefore we shouldn't approach it, just like it sounds like your response to the AIX architecture, then it seems like I can just go a different direction, which seems fine. But if the claim is that we need to find a way for users to use it, it would be good to get feedback on why it's not usable before making those claims.
Yeah, so I have not actually made, even if they've been heard that way, any claims that it's not usable. I have no belief that it is usable or unusable.
For an edge case and an enterprise user.
Yes, that doesn't necessarily make it unusable. And policies seems to have, like, as you said, your company cares about it. I think there are companies that do, but it has not seemed from my point of view that policies was widely workshopped and widely like to the non-enterprise community, nor like it seemed like it sort of has shipped in versions of Node relatively quietly. And I'm sure I'm not trying to, I'm sure you've gotten lots of feedback. I'm not trying to suggest it's inappropriate to be there or anything like that. It's just, it seems to me like a feature built with your use cases in mind.
So what is the action that we can take?
Right. So I think let me restate then. I think that the goal ideally should be that the ecosystem wants to use policies because it makes everything more secure. Meaning that they want to, that NPM users want to, in their applications, define these permissions and use the mechanisms that you've begun to build to prevent all of the security issues you've referenced. And in order to do that, it requires adoption from package authors.
So not necessarily. So if we look at a variety of things like how Dino does permissions and how headless browsers do permissions, instead they take the opposite approach of denying permissions by default. And so if your default is denial and the package author does need to whitelist it, just like you mentioned for AIX, to run in strict mode, whatever we want to call it.
Right.
There's two driving forces. I don't think package authors ever want to write extra metadata. That's not appealing.
True.
And I don't think they want to try to iterate the permissions that they have. That's not appealing either. And so I don't think it'll ever be appealing, honestly. That's not what this feature is for. It's for the people who are running your command line. It's not for the package authors.
So I think we're running out of time. There's a few other people with their hands up. I don't know, Wes, Owen.
Well, yeah, my points, I think I would say if we are going to go down this route, we need to really strongly consider the points Jordan made first. So that is probably the more important conversation to have. And Bradley, as you were saying, it might not ever be appealing. And if that is the case, that's fine. That means, again, I think it comes back to this group providing feedback and waiting until there is something actionable for this group specifically. Because I think as this conversation, it reinforced what I was trying to say earlier, which is as this conversation has gone on, we've gone in a bit of circles and I don't think we have enough meat here to make what is an actionable next step from like the technical standpoint. I think we can make a recommendation and say, going to NPM with a RFC, going to, have it building out a more robust proof of concept, I think would be great next steps for me personally to understand the impact, because I don't think it has answered the very important question that Jordan was posing, which is why should I, as a package maintainer, do this, right? Which is the question that needs to be answered before this group can really have any help, because we would then come up with a spec that is appealing to package authors, right? But if we don't think that the fundamental feature is appealing just yet, I think we need that before we can do the next steps that this group is specifically chartered and capable of discussing.
I would,
Owen, last.
Yeah, just because I wanted to key in on that, and I think what Bradley, just like the last thing that he said about who this is, I think there is a great question to be asked about who is this proposal for? Is it for application / package consumers or package authors? I was under the impression that this was, and maybe that's what node policy is, and so I was mistaken, but I was under the impression that what this was maybe proposing is like in a Dino, you can lock down your app at runtime and maybe potentially NPM time to say, I'm only going to allow FS. That's it. And I put that in my package JSON or policy config. And then if I want to go that strict in that packages, you could go to so you could define that at your app. And then depending on how strict the policy goes, packages could effectively whitelist their way in through their own manifest to your application. So, and so I don't know if that's what node policy was for, but I think I see the value here in applications being able to say, I only want my application to access these particular features of node, and maybe like by default warn me if a package is exceeding its scope, or deny if it's exceeding its scope. And then I thought that maybe the conversation was like, so how do we meet the more stricter threshold of enterprise that's like deny by default, but you can whitelist your way in? And so that to me was like the long tail, but the initial tail is just how do I manage my application's usage of node.
So we are at time. It sounds like we still got lots more to discuss. So, I think we can keep it on the agenda for the next time. If you've tagged it for the agenda, it will automatically show up.
I don't think I'm gonna come back anytime soon with this. It
Okay.
seems like there's an appeal for this to be about package authors and not about a more global package consumer application developer thing, at least from this working group. So I'm going to try to find a better place. It sounds like a package manager might be a better place to go talk to. And I'm just going to close that issue for now, because it doesn't seem like any of the feedback I've gotten here is about actually trying to do this except in the realm of package authors.
Well,
yeah, I was
to be clear, Bradley, all I've been saying is that I think that if your goal is that you want package authors to be able to document things in their own packages for the sake of policies to consume them, then like it needs to be the value prop needs to be clear, and that I think would be appropriate for this group. If that is not a direction you want to go in, then there's definitely other
like that's what this group wants, just from what I've been hearing. So I'm not really eager to like slug through many meetings of trying to convince myself that this is the right place.
Yeah, I was going to try and add that I mean, personally, I don't think we have to. The main thing that people wanted to understand a bit better was the use cases. I didn't think that necessarily needed to be like implemented in a tool, but just written down. Yeah, I guess that's maybe back to my other comment too. Is it like, this particular focus area, or is it something more like, I think what you want is some agreement that this is a common addition to the package JSON file, right? Regardless of the consumer.
Yeah, that's basically it. I originally went to the NPM RFC and I got redirected here, but it seems like this should go through a different thing, like a CLI for a tool that would manage this.
Yeah, I apologize, Bradley. That was me that I think said to bring this here based on the scope of this work. So we can take it back and maybe flush out an RFC together for what this looks like. And I'd love to talk more about it offline maybe. So
yeah, I think just probably worth noting that the reason why we recommended to come here is to have a more neutral ground to discuss it. So we also have the possibility of the other package managers jumping in and participating in the conversation if they are not like comfortable doing so in the NPM OpenRFC calls.
And that's kind of where I was wondering, like, is a collaboration space appropriate? Like, if we had a generic collaboration space, which was like, what do we agree is the content of the package JSON, then it would have been a natural, hey, let's go discuss it there. And anybody who's interested from the different package managers or other, the representatives from this team or from other teams could actually join as well. So it does seem to me it's a gap that we have in terms of like, where do we go to discuss what should be in that file, which is quite important to the ecosystem.
That seems fine to establish a collaboration space. It just doesn't, I feel very uncomfortable trying to do that here. It doesn't seem like our priorities align, and it'll just cause friction.
It would be a different group. Like I'm talking about an OpenJS collaboration space, but again, it's probably not, the more you get people involved, the more comments and discussion will take place. So if it's just like, hey, let's get some, trying to get quick feedback on whether something looks good or not, that'll make things perhaps take longer rather than shorter.
Sure.
Okay, well, we are out of time. And I guess, you know, we if there's interest, we could pick up next year in the next meeting. If not, you know, then not. But I guess we ended up using the whole time and more. I know I need to drop off, so I think at this point we'll say thanks for everybody for their work this year, and we'll see you in the new year. Thanks.
Ciao.
Bye.